So clear yourself of whatever's distracting you in front of yourself. And close your eyes. Haraway lands us in a moment, which is now, when the way things are has become unthinkable any longer. When the idea of the bounded individual ontologically, ecologically, corporeally, separate from context and environment, is categorically unable to sustain the overflowing richness of biological knowledges. And so what is needed now are new forms of collective thinking, multi-species models, with all the unfaithful offspring of the sky gods. Not to mention unruly cyborgian assemblages of machine and human, in order that we stay with the trouble of current existence, in generative joy and creative terror. Into this mess creeps Pomoa Cthulhu, a surreptitious spider native to the redwood forests of Sonoma and Mendocino counties, near where Haraway lives, in north-central California. A creature from the wild, from the elsewhere, which is all around and within us, whose tentative, fingery creep probes and feels its wayfaring way along a series of interlaced trails, the webs and webworks of the mulch of multi-species coexistence, and co-producing towards a speculatively fabulated future, a revolt against the Anthropocene, the Capitalocene, the Plantationocene, in quest of new geostories of symbiosis, of the creating and growing together of worlds, in which on-the-ground collectives capable of inventing new practices of imagination, resistance, revolt, repair, mourning, and of living and dying well, come into existence. As Haraway says, we need another figure to think through and be the protagonist of this unworlding/rewording. Well, not just one figure, but hordes of figuration, composting and generating the humus of terran flourishing, in which we and all other tentacular beings cultivate a new multi-species response ability, collecting up the trash of the Anthropocene, the exterminism of the Capitalocene, and chipping and shredding and laying that garden, make a much hotter compost pile for still possible pasts, presents, and futures.
While he does poetry, I'm going to tackle some science. This is where I first got interested in spiders, I think, and it's a short paper on the fact that humans recognize the spider silhouette before they even know that it's a spider or anything like that. So it's like a very immediate precognition recognition. So we're actually biologically encoded to be scared of spiders, and that's because you can't tell what spiders are dangerous on first sight, so it's better to just avoid them all. So we evolved that. So that's like spiders as an evolutionary antagonist, but I also like to think of us as coming from the same seed. So here's a short little clip on spiders dreaming.
Everyone wants to know my secret. After all the financial spreadsheets go. How did my business take off like a whale?
And then one night I was just quickly glancing into the boxes, and all of them were hanging like Christmas decorations, suspended on a silk thread from the lid. And I got super curious what the hell they are doing. So So the first clue was that this whole suspended position was exclusively something we see at night in these spiders that are only active during the day, hinting at them actually engaging in sleep behavior. And the first night we saw those twitching, which was very in line with what you probably used to see in dogs and cats when they dream. And the twitches came in very regular intervals of about
So to me, this implies that even our worm ancestors had the capacity, or at least the ingredients, to develop dreaming, which I think is really cute.
Such figures come from the wild. The tarantula, the outlaw, the anarchist, the queer, the unbuilder. They inhabit zones of instability and fugitivity on the edge of cities, regulatory frameworks, zones of epistemological or aesthetic comfort. They exist in the unware, the ungovernable, unpropertied, uncomfortable, unbuilt, uncouth. For Jack Halberstam, seeing through the lens of the photographer Alvin Baltrop, one emergence of this unware was the piers of New York City in the late 1970s and 1980s, where Gordon Matter Clark also enacted his Day's End Unbuilding project that slashed out voids from the industrial sheds, surgically breaching outside and inside, cutting open the sealed envelope of structure to expose new sightlines, render it vulnerable, penetrable, a framing of its already destituted insides. If you read the Jack Halberstam reading from 1 or 2 weeks ago, you'll recognize the Day's End piece is the slashed void on the left, which Matter Clark carved out from this industrial shed. Baltrop's photographs witnessed these interzones of the counter-capitalist landscape, capturing momentary vignettes of queer life inhabiting spaces of dispossession and ruination with unruly togetherness. Bodies complete the physical collage of ruined pier, demolished shed, slashed facade, like a live performance version of assemblage art.
I started to get interested in jumping spiders specifically through TikTok, I think, which says a lot more about humans than it does about spiders. And spiders, or jumping spiders specifically, have been having a moment on TikTok recently. And that's because, like, they have puppy eyes and it's so cute. But I can explain, so, like, when people interact with their jumping spiders, they, like, always cock their gaze and, like, look at you. So it's very easy to, like, fall in love with them. And this is what's happening. So they have 8 eyes, and 6 of them, their peripheral eyes around the back, have 360 degrees of vision, but they're very blurry and dark, and they're monochrome. And then they have 2 principal eyes in the front, these 2 big ones, and those actually can be, like, individually directed, and they're very, very hyper-focused, high-resolution images. So what happens is the spider is detecting the human motion, and then it's looking at you to see in clearer detail. They also do this, like, hand-waving thing, and that's because they have setae, which is like a hair that is used for sensing. So they have setae all over their arms, and so when they're doing that, they're kind of like just trying to sense the environment. So really it's like this motion, and then they have all these different components that make them easy to project onto. So, yeah.
We read before of the discomfort that many viewers experienced in visiting this work made by Noah Purifoy in 1971. It's a photograph from an installation at the Brockman Gallery in LA, and it modelled a destitute apartment, littered with trash, piles of used clothes, junk in baskets, TV on but showing nothing, audio recordings of junk atmospheric noise, mute bodies concealed under fabrics, except 2 which were mechanized to infer copulation. As Lisa Uddin described it, as a bleak installation of subversive undoingness that gets its power from its resistance and refusal of the false ideological dreams and aesthetics of Californian architectural and urban boosterism that do not apply to his community. Against ideals of domestic Southern California, writes Uddin, as light-filled, straightforward, and clean, Purifoy's installation, with its malfunctioning, dirty people and things, re-spatialized the abject underbelly of middle-class whiteness.
Spider decision-making. This is a study on spiders' favorite color. I think it doesn't actually say anything about that, but they do have preferences. Here, this is a tarantula building a web, right? But I've seen on a lot of forums that if the tarantula does not like the substrate, if it's too wet or too dry, they'll just carpet fully over it. And then, could you play that video? So this is some of my work with jumping spiders. And what I did was I set up a light detection system so that the spider can turn on the light. And after an hour, like, it slowly fades and the spider can re-trigger it. So I'm not a coder, and it took me until the exhibition to figure out how to do it. So the spider only had 24 hours to try to figure it out, and it couldn't. But here you can see that it clearly liked the light. So it was on 8 times speed at first, so it just sat for the whole hour near the light. And as soon as the light turns fully off, the spider starts to like look around, sense around, and see how it can re-trigger the light.
At the same time, as Uddin reports, Purifoy was launching the Watts Summer Arts Festival and assisting an urban anti-poverty plan by constructing a model for a library and art gallery to be attached to a pilot community centre in Watts. Rebuilding the terrain and destituting the terrain happened together. The undoing and remaking energies of material creativity seeded in the wild and the waste. Trash taking flight. It often begins with a gathering of the discards, archiving forms out of formlessness, collecting bag after bag of brightly coloured polyethylene, stockpiling and sorting materials for the yet to be built, like the Museo Aerosolar projects, initiated by Thomas Saraceno in 2007, that gather trashed plastic bags from the Capitalocene and reconstitute them through community reweaving workshops as sun-powered vehicles for exploration and sensing of the atmosphere, like buoyant Watts towers. The plan is to unbuild, and the plan is to take flight, to aim for the maximum reversibility of materials, conjuring motley guilds of community builders to make the most out of the least. And in this taking flight might also be seen the anarchic ballooning of what Marquis Bay scripted as, quote, a rebellious communing with those we are not supposed to relate with or to, a coalitional fugitivity of strangers who create an ensemble on the grounds of unanticipated criteria.
So this is just more like, so I mapped out like what we've kind of spec'd into evolutionarily. So humans obviously have maxed out general intelligence, like brains, and then we also have really good vision. And then most spiders that you're probably familiar with are orb weavers, and they're really good at web building. So I put them over here on brains because that's a specific intelligence, but it takes a lot of neurons to develop something so complicated. And then I have jumping spiders over there, and they see really well, and they spec less into web building. So because like eyesight takes a lot of neurons as well, so they've evolved to use their eyesight much more, and they only use silk as hammocks for like sleeping, and also they drop down a silk line when they move. They sort of anchor, and before every jump they lock down a silk line, so if they fall they can retrace their steps and go back. Yeah.
In the Arachnean, Fernand Deligny writes, quote, that the network is a mode of being. Inferring from the lives of spiders and the lives of humans, the existential webbedness of life, the communality of weaving and existing in and continually reconstituting the silk of being together. Can we say that the spider's project is to weave its web, he asks. I don't think so. We might as well say that the web's project is to be woven. That is to say, out there, beyond the individual and its condition and capacity and minor projects, is a systemic purpose or project which is unfolding or might unfold, and the work of the individual is to get muddled up in this, to give away a little or a lot of self-oriented production goals and let the silk flow through you. Forms, from this point of view, are like the aerosine balloon, scripts and prompts for work including many hands, assembling heterogeneous fragments, admitting a lot of error, deviance, oscillation, redundance, reusing and recombining various parts, yet with enough shared understanding to achieve flight. So the spider makes its silken threads, reflects Deligny in another passage, that can be said to have been projected, enabling the weaving on the basis of which, as the web is woven, it literally swallows back the precursory threads. Not that it belittles or scorns them. The silk that emerges from its body is highly precious and is recuperated. When the preliminary scaffolding has disappeared, has been swallowed up, there is nothing left of the threads, or rather they have become those of the woven web that exists and persists.
Okay. Anyway. So I think this is what y'all took Parable of the Tarantula for. Definitely the tectonics of webs. So here's some things that are cool. So here's like a diagram of all the different components, but these are all different types of silk produced by the spider, and the spider is choosing what silk comes out and where it goes. And here's some of the science on like how it works, and they can use the same spinnerets, and then they have different spinnerets as well. What does that one say? Oh, this is for you, Krish. Something about silk underwater. Because of the density, it is more like if we had lines underwater. Yeah, just interesting construction-y stuff.
The word silk come from spiders?
Sorry?
Do you know about the word silk? Like, was it originally used for spiders and then...
Oh, I don't know.
No, I don't think so, because the word that produces the silk comes from monolithic tissue. So it's because of the way that there's a whole reason why that is.
Caterpillars. What are the figures and the zones of figuration that you are going to use to entangle yourself and your material practices of architecture with? Maybe a Vampiroteousis Infernalis. In the mock scientific philosophical treatise by Willem Flusser, named after the vampire squid, an attempt is made at biological existentialism, describing the underwater creature on the blurry verge of indistinction between fact and fiction, recounting elaborate depictions of its life, its extensive and varied hoard of sexual organs, its rituals of copulation, the epidermal art it produces by changing the color of its skin, its poison glands, ink-squirting communication codes, and bioluminescence. For Flusser, who was a historian and theorist of communications media, like television, the livid, multicolored, luminescent, orgasmic, message-sending, scream-like vampire of the deep, which might appear at first the most extreme other of the human, is gradually understood to be sharing similar existential problems as humans, a creature with whom it would be possible to enter into multi-species entanglement. This one.
Sensing through webs. I was kind of talking about, like, jumping spiders. They developed better vision, whereas orb weavers developed better web building. But both of those are used as sensing the physical environment. So webs are not just habitats for spiders, they're extension of sight and hearing as well. So this is a paper on how they hear with webs, but that's hearing. That's not vibration. Like, their brains are coded to pick up the vibration the way our eardrums are coded to pick up vibration and turn it into a processing of the environment that's beyond just touch. It's an actual sense beyond touch. And then this is about orb weavers being blind, and so it's talking about how they sense vision essentially along 3D lines. So they have, it's instead of eyes, they're still sensing a visual environment through the construction of these different lines that's spatial and helps them inform how they perceive the world.
The question of the monster is equivalent to the question of waste. Both are outcast. And then there are figures of monstrous waste. A pile of dust by an architectural practice whose French name, pronounced in French, hérésie, sounds like the English word heresy, which is their mission. This project, Dusty Relief, proposes a building with electrostatic envelopes, chain mails of copper wiring, charged to attract and hold the minuscule debris of the city, befurring itself with the dust which plant philosopher Michael Marder has called not a symbol of anarchic communities, but their all too real apotheosis. In his book entitled Dust, Marder theorizes dust as the ultimate commoning of all things. Shed skin, plant fibers, pulverized meteor showers, dismantled spider webs, surface soil particulates, polluted emissions. A community without origins, made of all species, out of which everything is made and to which everything returns. But it also visualizes what Timothy Morton has seen as the impossibility of an elsewhere, the false and blinded ideology that material economies are not circular, that production can continue ceaselessly and its waste will just disappear. Whereas that the reality, especially in construction, is that teeming, crowded, multitudinous zones of wastage accrue at the edges. Like the city of Leonia, narrated by Italo Calvino in the novel Invisible Cities, that throws itself away at the end of the day, and builds itself again the morning of the next, perpetually pristine, but for the looming mountains of urban excrement that threaten from its periphery to collapse and consume their origin. From invisibility to fixation, architecture's dust and trash presents a debris that Jane Bennett describes as hovering and vibrating in indeterminacy, at one moment disclosing itself as dead stuff, and at the next, live presence. Wilderness, dust, waste, spiders, they challenge received notions of the comfortable, the livable, and the boundedness, individuality, property, and security of the self. Are we missing one?
This is my last one, but this is why I actually care about the spider. Like I've been talking about, and I think what this class is about, they're highly projectable. And I've taken the spider as sort of a metaphor for my struggles with like my mental health. And I think there's something about the way that we're so quick to step on a spider, to crush an entire perspective, I think is something that I held close, and in trying to understand something that you can't really understand, I learned a lot more about myself, and yeah, I think that's it, but I think it's not really about me or the spider. It's like, it could be any person and it could be any animal, but this idea of like a fully different perspective and coming to terms with that. And I think if we can understand even the spider, then we can understand each other better. So, yeah.
When Kropotkin imagined the morning after the revolution, he imagined a situation in which the private property that sustains capital accumulation is immediately and completely unheld. All the dwelling places in the city have been expropriated. They're going to be redistributed to each according to their need. I'm willing to go into Kropotkin's story, to imagine the details, maybe change or fill some others in. One thing he doesn't describe, but which I guess must happen, is that all the doors are unlocked. I wonder what that would be like. It may seem far-flung, but I remember the feeling of joining Cyclavia for the first time. All the streets are closed to cars. You can ride anywhere you like. Who's been on Cyclavia? I know one person. Nobody else? Missed out the revolution. All the streets are closed to cars. You can ride anywhere you like. The system has been overturned. The regime you thought was unalterable has been instantly changed. A crazy happiness spreads around the riders. Everybody is suddenly free. It's a moment, just a moment within a few limited miles, but it feels real. In 1927, Marcel Duchamp had a door fabricated for his art studio at 11 Rue Larry in Paris. The door was hinged at the corner intersection between two rooms, each of which had a doorway at 90 degrees to the other. There were two doorways, but only one door. If the door was closed on one side, the other was open, and vice versa. And if it was left ajar in the middle, they were both open. When Marquis Bay theorizes the ungovernable, the door is the figure that represents the absolute and radically necessary openness of the future. Quote, our anarchic world building must be unconditional. The door swings open for refuge, even though it may let in the police agents and destruction. As we heard 2 weeks ago, Fred Moten expressed his experience of home in the figure of his friend, who came in from the outside, unannounced, whenever he pleased, asking no permission, thereby refiguring home as the condition in which you share your house. Literally, it's the condition in which you give your house away constantly as a practice of hospitality. Through the anarchic door of Duchamp's studio, someone will always be able to pass. Likewise, at the end of Bay's anarcho-blackness, after all of its rich preceding theoretical discourse, some concrete steps are laid out, Kropotkin style, for envisioning the happening of the anarchaotic revolution. Quote, opening our homes to those who need them without charging rent. Opening the park or the rooftops to those who wish to sleep outdoors under the stars without being disturbed. Opening the abandoned houses down the way where the squatters become instead stewards of the space because it's now their home. Opening, opening, opening. The doors swing wide, and tentacularly and tarantula-like, we creep in. Thank you, Asad, for
Thanks, John.
joining me together.